Welcome to Pittsburgh Sports Memories. My name is Steve Word, and joining me is,
Tim Hannon.
and as usual, we'll be covering sports topics from the Pittsburgh sports scene. Today we have a pretty exciting one. It's the best team seasons of Pittsburgh sports all time. This is any sport, professionally or college, that has been played. We didn't include high school, sorry, like that Bethel Park winning, girls softball team. You didn't make the cut. Sorry, unfortunately. But if you would like to follow along, if you're following on our podcast, you can go to the website, Tim.
PittsburghSportsMemories.weebly.com, and there'll be a printout of this. We're doing it in a bracket format.
Yes, it's going to be NCAA bracket. We'll say the seeds and stuff and what round we're on. But if you'd like to follow along visually, you could pull that up on your screen or print it out, however you'd like. The three criteria basically I used for this was if the team had won a championship, how easy the run was, was it a pretty smooth run? And the third one was the strength of the competition they faced in general. So with those three criteria in mind, without any further introduction, we'll jump right into the bracket. The first bracket, I didn't list them as north, south, east, and west, but okay, whatever. The first part is the number one seed would be your 1978 Steelers, who won Super Bowl 13 against Dallas. I think it was 35-31. It's probably one of the better Super Bowls in general. It's still considered. It was a very back and forth game, but the Steelers beat Roger Staubach, who I think they had the second best record in the NFL that year. So it was pretty good. And they're going against the those plucky 2018 Pittsburgh Riverhounds. This is probably the Riverhounds' best season so far. They won their league, which in American soccer is equivalent to the championship in England if you follow soccer. So it's like AAA baseball, it basically is what it's equivalent to. And they won the USL regular season for the first time ever, but they did lose to eventual champion Louisville in the playoffs, and it was actually a home game. And they had a sellout, which for them is only 6,000 people, but for soccer in Pittsburgh, that was a pretty good turnout. That game, I had the 78 Steelers moving on to the next round, obviously, because, the Riverhounds are just a lesser professional team that aren't on the highest level of their sport yet.
Yeah, good call on that. That was a pretty easy 1 versus 16.
Yeah,
no upset there.
Yeah. Moving on to staying in this, part of the bracket, the number 8 seed was the 1927 Pirates, who lost the World Series to some team from New York called the Yankees. And that 1927 team, Yankees had, Ruth, Larry, Gehrig, the whole murderers row. So you can kind of forgive the Pirates for losing that one. That was probably pretty tough. Like the 27 Yankees are considered one of the best teams ever, but the 27 Pirates did win the pennant and did play the World Series, although they did lose the Yankees. They went up against the number 9 seed, which was the 2016 Pitt football team, which had an 8-4 record, and they beat Penn State and national champion Clemson on the road, and Penn State ended up being a top 4 team too. So that was a very successful team. I had this kind of, it's an 8-9, so it's not a big upset. But I thought Pitt would have had a little more successful season, even though they didn't win their bowl game that year. I had Pitt football moving on over the 27 Pirates, even though the Pirates did win the pennant. But that was kind of a close call there, I thought.
Yeah, to your point about competition, right? That was one of your criteria. And that 2016, I don't know what the 1927 National League, how competitive that was, but 2016 Pitt beating two of the top teams in the Power 5 conferences was pretty impressive, and beating Clemson on the road was pretty amazing too. So that was a pretty good team.
Which is funny because I predicted that before the season. I should have bet money on that. I would have won lots of money.
I definitely did not.
Because I said that, and it was funny. As soon as I came in the next day, the people were like, "You predicted." I was like, "Yeah, I've been a Pitt fan for way too long." Staying on this side, number 6 seed, 2013 Pirates win wild card, the infamous Cueto chant game. To the number 12 seed 1984 Steelers, who lost in the AFC Championship game to Dan Marino. That was the infamous Harvey the Toast Clayton game. They couldn't cover Clayton and Duper. Out of that, I had since the Pirates won their wild card, they did lose to the Cardinals the next thing, but I think the Pirates had a little more successful season, so I went with the 2013 the Pirates over the 84 Steelers.
Yeah, good call on that one, Steve. We did an episode about that 2013 team and about that Cueto game, and that was kind of a really good memory. And I don't know that a lot of people remember the 84 Steelers. That was a 9-7 team that got hot in the playoffs and upset Denver and made it to the championship game. But Mark Malone was our quarterback. I don't think anyone would ever mistake them for an all-time great team.
Yeah, and they lost to, in that 84 Dolphins teams lost to the 49ers pretty handily. So it wasn't like the Dolphins. They were the best team in the AFC, but they definitely weren't even probably the second best team in football that year. So
correct.
The number 7 seed versus the 10 seed. The 7 seed was the 2008-2009 Pitt basketball. They had 31 wins. They were a number 1 seed. They lost to Villanova in the Elite Eight on the Scotty Reynolds play. That's a painful memory. The number 10 seed, 2001 Steelers. They went on to go 13-3 with Cordell Stewart, for some reason having a resurgent year. They ended up losing to the Patriots with Cordell at the quarterback. And for this one, I did have the lower seed, the 10. I thought the Steelers at 13-3 was a little better season. I mean, I think that Pitt basketball team underachieved that year. They really should have beat Villanova. I mean, Villanova was okay. I mean, no, they were a good team, but I don't know. Pitt, it's just so disappointing. Not that the Steelers losing to the Patriots wasn't disappointing, but maybe looking back, they did, 13-3 was a really successful season. So I had the 2001 Steelers moving on from that matchup.
Yeah, interesting matchup here because both of those teams lost games that I don't think people expected them to win. So at the time they were both upsets, but I think looking back, the Patriots weren't a Cinderella team like we all thought they were at the time. They actually were a dynasty.
Yeah,
so.
Maybe just the edge on strength of competition. The Patriots are a little, even though they were considered a plucky upstart, underdog, maybe they're a little better than the Villanova team that Pitt ended up losing to. Number 5 seed versus number 11 seed, the 1993 Penguins. They won the President Cup, but they lost to the Islanders in the second round. That's an interesting team, and we'll talk about them probably a lot more as we go on. The number 11 seed was the 91 Pirates, who they lost to the Braves in 7 games in the NLCS. This was not this was the year before Sid slid, so this was not that. I guess they still had Bonilla that year. Yeah,
they did.
Yeah, so I had the Penguins, the 93 Penguins team, moving on from that. Even though they lost to the Islanders in the second round, I like to save some stuff as we go further on. We'll talk about them more, but they were definitely, that team was loaded.
It was, and that 91 Pirates team, that was one of my favorite teams. That was such a good year. They had won the division the year before, and then they just got even better. John Smiley won 20 games that year inexplicably, and you really thought that was going to be their year. They were up 3-2 in the NLCS, coming back home for the last 2 home games, and they got shut out at home in Game 6 and 7.
I think did the Braves, was that the year the Braves won? No.
No, they
did not win the World
Series.
They
lost to Minnesota in the bottom of the 10th inning of Game 7.
Yeah, so that was a pretty good Braves team.
It was, and they had Glavine, and that was the year Glavine won the Cy Young, and they had Smoltz, and they had that great rotation.
But like I said, that 93 Penguins team was loaded.
It was.
It was loaded.
Yeah, it was.
Which, another team that kind of underperformed a little bit. Number 4 versus 13. Super Bowl 43, 2008 Steelers. They went on the Santonio Holmes catch. There's a 1970 Pirates team. They lost to the Reds in the NLS. The Pirates did that a lot in the 70s. The Big Red Machine was too much. So I had the Steelers, since they won the Super Bowl, moving on to win Super Bowl 43.
Yeah, that was one of the first. I don't know if that was the first year or second year when they instituted division play and they started doing an NLCS instead of just winning the overall pennant.
Yes. Yeah, because I think it was 68. Yeah, they started.
Yeah, and it was a 5-game series, and I believe Cincinnati swept that series. I think it was a 3-0 sweep. So the Pirates had a very good year that year, but Cincinnati was clearly better as opposed to the 08 Steelers, which obviously proved to be the best team in the league by winning the championship.
The 2017, the 3rd seed versus the 14 seed. The 2017 Penguins, they win the Stanley Cup back-to-back over Nashville. Another Riverhounds team, they made the playoffs for the first time in 3 years. They lost in a shootout in 7 rounds. I actually was at this game. They played a team, the minor league team for the Philadelphia Union. It's like the Bethlehem something or other, Bethlehem Steel or something like that. Because they couldn't be the Steelers, they had to be the Steel. But they won on heartbreaking fashion too. Like the Riverhounds gave up I remember a late free kick that went off the post and in, and then they played overtime straight up, and then 7 rounds of shootout. You were literally down to defensemen kick it, and just finally one of the defensemen for the Riverhounds missed, and that was kind of the game. But I definitely had the. Who was it? The Penguins. The Penguins back-to-back. That was their second back-to-back Cup win. I had them going over that Riverhounds team. The next team in the bottom of the bracket, and the last for this little, I guess, what would they call that? Pod or whatever. What do they call that in the region? I guess.
Yeah.
Would be the number 2 seed 1979 Steelers, who won Super Bowl 14 over the Rams. That was the last of the Dynasty 70s teams, versus the 1952 Duquesne basketball team, who made a Sweet 16 appearance in the NCAA tournament. And I just think that Steelers team was still pretty good, and that's a dynasty. That's pretty amazing. Duquesne makes an NCAA tournament, but it's just a bad matchup for Duquesne. Like, that team was just better. It's hard to argue with that one.
Yep.
So going to the bottom part of the region, going back to number 1 seed and whatever we're calling this part of the region, sure, the South, I don't know, whatever. The 1971 Pirates beat Baltimore in 7 games with Clemente and Blast. That's like an iconic team. That Game 7, if you ever watched it, it's amazing. It's basically all Clemente and Blast. The Riverhounds, again, another Riverhounds team. Another game I was at, they have the Lamar Hunt Cup in MLS, which is basically an open, like the U.S. Open. You can have any soccer team from Joe's soccer team down the street to DC United. And DC United came to Pittsburgh, and the Riverhounds played them all the way into overtime and ended up giving up 2 goals in overtime. And for a AAA, it would be like the Washington Wild Things taking the Yankees to extra innings, and losing. That's basically what happened. But obviously the Pirates winning the World Series, and that's an iconic Pirates team and a very good Pirates team. Definitely moved on from there.
Makes sense.
Yeah. The number 8 seed was 1981 Pitt Football. They are 11-1 record with a number 2 final ranking. I think the only game they lost was to a blowout at Penn State at the end of the year, which Penn State fans are still hanging on to. Good luck with that. Number 9 was the 1990 Pirates. They won the pennant, but they lost the World Series champion Reds with Dibble, and they had a couple other pretty good pitchers on that team.
Yeah, Randy Myers, John Franco. Yeah, they were loaded.
Yeah, so moving on from that, I had the Pitt Football. Since they're 11-1, a little better, a little more success. I think they did win their bowl game. I don't know if they,
Yeah, that was a loaded Pitt team, and that's another.
It's like Hugh Green and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that was again, if you would have had anything that resembled a playoff back then, Pitt probably wins the national championship, but losing the game to Penn State just killed them.
And it was the last game of the year.
And they were up 14-0 in that game too. Yeah, and eventually the final score was
47 though.
Yeah, it just somehow it got away from them. So it's unfortunate. It was a rivalry game, and they didn't come up big, but that's one of the things I hate about college football, especially back then. if that game would have been September 2nd, it might not have mattered, but because it was near the end of the year, it mattered. And so it's just the way college football is. Why you can't have a playoff system to determine the best team, I'll never understand. But that's a topic for another day.
Well, we could probably do a whole hour on that. I have my own ideas.
Easily, yes.
Yeah. And it probably really isn't that hard to solve, quite honestly. You could, yeah. All right. Not to get into that too much, because I could go on for a long time about that. The number 6 seed, 1902 Pirates. This is before the World Series, so I wasn't sure what to do with this team. Like, they won the pennant, but there was I think the American League was around then, but they didn't play them till 1903, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So I don't know what to do with this Pirates team. They won a championship, maybe. I mean, they're kind of like some of the Pitt football national champion teams. You're not quite sure. Like, it's just, I'm not quite sure where to put them.
They won everything that there was to win. You can say that about them. At the time. There was nothing else they could have won.
Yeah.
Because
I don't know how good the Boston Americans or whoever was really good in the American League was.
Well, you might temper it by saying that they did the same thing the next year. And obviously, teams change year to year. But in 1903, they did the same thing. They won the pennant, but then they lost
to
the first World Series to Boston.
Yeah.
So maybe they weren't the best team in America if you go by what happened the next year. But again, you'll never know because there wasn't a chance to find out.
In the 12th seed was the 2012-13 Penguins. They made the conference finals, but they got totally swept by Boston. They signed Iginla late in the season as a rental player. I mean, they got kind of like totally like swept out of the. There was really another kind of an underachieving team probably. I just had the Penguins moving on from this because I don't know. I think a conference final, like I said, I didn't know what to do with that Pirates team, but I just figured that Penguins team was good, but they kind of underachieved, and I guess a conference final was better than a National League pennant. I don't know.
It's fair. I mean, it's really hard to compare eras. Like I'll hear people say, "Well, the Packers have more championships than the Steelers." It's like, okay, but when they won the 1929 NFL championship and there was like 8 teams and 4 of them folded in the middle of the season, because they didn't have enough money. Like it's just hard to compare eras.
It's the same thing with like when people argue about the Canadians having 26 cups. 20,
yeah, and
like
there was only
6 teams. Yeah,
it's not the same. So it is hard to compare eras. So I think that's a fair upset there.
Okay, here we go. Here's an upset for you. Upset alert. Here you go. The number 7 seed was 1929 Pitt football. Now, they were the national champs despite Pitt went to the Rose Bowl every year for 4 years and lost every year. And they lost the Rose Bowl to USC, but because college football is college football, they still were national champions. So I kind of held that Rose Bowl loss against them because it's kind of ridiculous that you still won a national championship but lost the Rose Bowl. And the number 10 seed in the 1955 Duquesne basketball, they won the NIT tournament. And not to like, I rank this team very highly because number one, Duquesne isn't exactly an athletic powerhouse, but in the 50s they were in basketball. And you have to understand, in 1955, there were only, 32 teams in the NCAA tournament, right? So winning the NIT was quite an accomplishment because the NIT was a very strong, it wasn't like nowadays where it's a complete joke.
Right.
But you really did have probably there were teams that probably got snubbed because you maybe played in a tough conference or whatever. So they definitely were beating probably ACC teams that were, and it isn't like Duquesne's like UCLA or Duke or North Carolina or Kentucky, one of the blue bloods. I mean, I don't know. I think that winning that NIT tournament is probably a pretty big moment in Duquesne sports. What say you, Duquesne alum?
Yeah, I'm all for it. Yeah, no, Duquesne has very little to celebrate in the history of their basketball program. So I will take winning the NIT and moving on.
But it was like I said, it was much tougher back then.
It was, and the NCAA wasn't what the NCAA is today. So when they talked about it, it wasn't this clear cut first tier, second tier like it is today, like you said. So it meant something back then. It wouldn't mean nothing today.
So in an upset, that even though Pitt was the national championship, I just put more weight in that NIT when I think they tougher and they actually won something that was proven, and it was probably very difficult to do.
And that's lame that they lost the Rose Bowl. I mean, I love Pitt, but it's like, come on, how are you the national?
Well, they
champion?
did that a lot. They did a lot of
course
losing
they
in
did.
the Rose Bowl.
Again, we're going to go back to this whole college football playoff idea, so we better move on.
Yeah. Number 5 is the 1925 Pirates win World Series over the Washington Senators, and I think who's the guy? Big Train or what they? Walter Johnson, I think, was the pitcher for the Senators.
Yes.
I mean, this is like the forgotten World Series. I remember like one time I got stuck in. My son had a library like report. He had to go to the library, so I was stuck like on that one floor in the Carnegie Library where they have all the old newspapers on microfiche. And I was so bored. I was like in between, like looking up, well, when's Armistice Day? Let's see what the Post-Gazette had to say about the armistice. It's like, oh, let's look up the 1920. I like literally read all the papers, like the sports pages from like the 1925 World Series, and it literally just made like a little. It wasn't like today where it's like big. It was just a little sidebar. It's like our Pirates won the World Series, or the bee's knees, you know. But they did win, and it's like the forgotten World Series for whatever reason. So. And they took on the 11 seed that was the 1994 Steelers, who lost the AFC Championship to the Chargers. Once again, another team that kind of underachieved. I had that since the Pirates won the World Series and those Steelers didn't win anything, not even the AFC. I had the 1925 Pirates, and they're forgotten. They're not forgotten to us. They're moving on to the next round.
So going back to your criteria again about the competition. The Senators were the defending world champions that year. They had won the World Series in 1924, and so they were beating the best teams. Whereas the Steelers had beaten Cleveland that year in the playoffs. It was a really good team that year, but they couldn't beat San Diego. They never got a shot at San Francisco or Dallas. There was no way you could say that they hadn't proven that they were one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the league at that point. Even
That's a good point.
Season.
Yeah, because Dallas and San Francisco are kind of the 2 best teams that year in '94.
Right.
So, the next up on the list, and is another upset alert, and this is probably like a lot of people are going to like yell at their screen about this one, but this be fun. Number 4 is the 2010 Steelers. They lost Super Bowl 45 to Green Bay. To the number 13 seed, the 1975 Pittsburgh Triangles. If you don't remember the Pittsburgh Triangles, neither did I before I did this. I think I vaguely remembered like being mentioned, but they won a World Team Tennis Championship, and they actually won the championship, whereas that Steelers team I thought really wasn't that good, and they didn't really, I mean, they beat Baltimore, right, in the championship, but they had to come back. Was that the Antonio Brown helmet catch?
That was in the divisional round.
Yeah, they had the helmet catch game.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, and then they were really getting blown out for most of the Super Bowl too.
Right.
To like a good Green Bay team. So I didn't like give them much credit as I should have So in upset alert fashion, the Pittsburgh Triangles are moving on.
And beating the Steelers.
The World Team Tennis Championship is worth more than a Super Bowl trip. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, I guess.
You know what? It would be fun to do an episode on that 2010 team because I agree with you. I think out of all their teams back then, especially out of the teams that went to the Super Bowl, that was by far the least. That was just an underwhelming team. They lost 4 games that year, but every time they played a good quarterback, Brady blew them out. Drew Brees and the Saints blew them out. And they got lucky because in the playoffs they played Flacco, and then they played Mark Sanchez and the Jets in the championship game.
Yeah.
And then in the Super Bowl, they almost got the Bears. The Bears had lost the NFC Championship to Green Bay, and they would have played Jay Cutler in the Super Bowl, and they could have stolen the Super Bowl championship, but their defense was not up to the task. And then Green Bay had a quarterback, and that they couldn't handle that. The offense didn't play well.
Jay Cutler would have emoed them. He would have given them a frowny face.
He would.
They would have all been really sad about it.
It was not a good team. I always thought the 2011 team, the team that lost to Tim Tebow, I always thought that team was actually better than the 2010 team. So I'm with you on the upset here.
All right, Pittsburgh Triangles, moving on. I couldn't name you a player on the Pittsburgh Triangles, but sure. The number 3 seed, the 1909 Pirates, this is their first World Series win. and they had the 14 seed, the 2003 Pitt basketball. They won the Big East regular season. In the tournament, they made the Sweet 16. Pitt basketball's done that a lot. I have the Pirates winning their first World Series, definitely moving on over like another, like making the Sweet 16 is kind of like, a decent Pitt basketball team, but not one of the greats. So definitely moving on there. And coming down to the bottom of the bracket, the number 2 seed, everybody remembers this game, the 1960 Pirates, Maz home run over the Yankees, a pretty good Yankees team. The Pirates, really got kind of fortunate they played a home game for Game 7, but I had them going against the 1988-89 Penguins. They defeated the Rangers in the first round. I remember them losing to the Flyers. I remember that series because the Flyers were they scored an empty net goal and they mocked Robbie Brown's celebration. I think that's also the series where Hextall went after Robbie Brown.
It was.
Robbie Brown really got under the Flyers' skin, but the Flyers got the last laugh. That was Mario's first playoff appearance and it was the team's first playoff appearance since 81-82. Since the Pirates won a World Series, I had the Pirates moving on to the next round, 1960.
Yeah, I loved that '89 Penguins team. That was when I first started getting really into hockey. Was that era, and that was the first really good team we had. So I was so into that team that year and that series. It was so heartbreaking because they were up 3-2, and they lost Games 6 and 7. But obviously, the '60 Pirates have to move on in that matchup.
Yeah.
It's a pretty easy one.
Okay, moving the other side of the bracket, we'll go back up to the top. Come on, if I can move it. All right, going to the top of the bracket. Number 1 seed is the 1979 World Series. The family, they beat Baltimore on a Willie Stargell clutch home run in the 7th inning, I do believe. Played against the 16th seed, which is Robert Morris. In 2010, they made the tournament, which is big time for Robert Morris. They won the conference, but they lost to Villanova on a bunch of crap calls. I mean, literally, Scotty Reynolds had 18 points, 16 of which I think was from the foul line. There was one time, literally, he was dribbling the ball, and the player from Robert Morris just cleanly stole the ball, and the refs were like, tweet! It's no, you cannot steal the ball from Scotty Reynolds. He does not turn the ball over in this game. It was bad. It was bad. And that coach ended up being kind of a jerk, but I guess maybe that's why he didn't get any calls. And a pretty easy one, another easy one since it is a 116, the 79 family moves on. In our 8-9 seed, 1931 Pitt football. The national champs, they went 8-1. Their only loss was the Notre Dame versus another 70s Pirates team, 1975 Pirates. They won 92 games, but they lost to the Reds again in the NLCS. Once again, Pitt won the national championship, even though they did lose to Notre Dame. I had Pitt moving on since they won the national championship, and the Pirates, once again, just couldn't. They probably really, they couldn't get past the Reds in the 70s. That really is the kind of the story of the Pirates in the 70s there.
Yeah, they were sort of the second best team in the National League for most of that decade. That's kind of the theme.
Yeah. In the number 6 seed versus the 12 seed was the 1901 Pirates winning the National League, another pre-World Series title. Versus the Pitt football 10-3 record, late loss to Cincinnati that spoiled the season. I was at that game, not the 1901 game, obviously. I had Pitt football moving on. I thought they did win their bowl game. They got really kind of shafted. They ended up playing in the Meineke Car Care Bowl. So Dion Lewis had a really great game in that. And once again, I don't know what to do with these Pirates teams that won National League pennants that didn't.
Not a lot of love for the early 20th century.
I don't
Pirates.
know. I mean, I don't know what poor Honus Wagner is gonna come back from his grave and beat me up or something. Although he wouldn't because he's such a nice guy. But
yeah, the 2009 Pitt team was probably their best team in the post Dan Marino era.
Yeah,
it probably was. And
well, they ran Dion Lewis 40, 50 times. I never thought much of I don't know why I never thought Dion Lewis was that good, but I guess he's better than I always kind of underestimated him. I always thought they had a really big offensive line, and he was decent enough running back to kind of hide behind him. Like, because he was so short, he would like kind of hide and just kind of pop out and get like 6 yards easy.
A lot of people would remember that team. If they had a 31-10 lead on Cincinnati. I was at that game too. And had they hung on to win that game instead of blowing a 21-point lead,
They would have to play Tim Tebow.
they would have played in the Sugar Bowl. And they might not have won that game. They probably wouldn't have won that game. But a lot of people would have remembered them a lot more had they played in the Sugar Bowl against Tim Tebow than had they played in the Car Care Bowl. So it was a pretty good team.
I think
despite
Deion
the
Lewis
loss.
did get a free set of snow tires for that. So. Helped him when he was with New England. The number 7 seed was 1934 Pitt football. They're national champs with Minnesota with an 8-1 record versus the 95 Steelers who lost Super Bowl 30 to the Cowboys. I just thought the 95 Steelers just like a co-national champions losing one game. I don't know. I mean, these are kind of an even matchup, but I don't remember the 1934 Pitt football team, and I remember the 95 team. So I put them through. So.
Yeah, that was a memorable team. We did an episode about them, and you and I were just sharing YouTube clips the other day of some of those games. It was a memorable team, and no offense to the 1934 Pitt, but
it's just the weird college football thing. Like, how do you go like co-national? I don't know.
Well, and again, different era. That's in the middle of the Depression. I wonder how many people were even going to college, much less playing college football. So you have to account for some of that too.
We got the number 5 seed, the 1972 Steelers. They won on an immaculate reception, but they lost to the Dolphins on a fake punt in the championship game versus the number 11 seed 1996 Penguins, who lost to Florida in the conference finals. That was when the trap was coming in, and they have John Van Beesbrook as their their goalie.
Yep.
I had the Steelers moving on in that one. They both did lose kind of in their championship game. It's a little bit more of an iconic team, and I don't know. Maybe Oakland was pretty good, and the Dolphins, that was their undefeated season, so probably the competition was a little stiffer. So
yeah, that's a good point. I mean, you had the immaculate reception versus the 4 overtime goal in the 96 playoffs, so you got to give it to the Steelers there.
In 92, we have the Penguins winning their second cup over the Blackhawks. Another Penguins team that's... How many Hall of Famers on this one? 4, 5?
At least.
Versus the 13 seed 2004 Steelers, who go 15-1, but they lost the AFC Championship game to the Patriots. I think this is one of the best Steeler teams of all time, but they really drew a short straw there, taking on those 92 Penguins, and I think that 92 Penguins team was just better. And they won a championship, and they're just, like I said, they're just a much better team.
Yeah, I agree with your result there. I'm just surprised you had the 04 Steelers as
that
a 13
low.
seed, because I know that's one of your
maybe it was
favorite teams.
a bad seed for them, but
yeah, well, sometimes that happens in tournament selection. You just have to
blame the committee.
Yes,
darn committee.
Darn committee made up of one Steve.
The number 3 seed is the 2016 Penguins. They won the Stanley Cup. That was their first of their back-to-backs in the 16s. I don't know, in the teens.
The teens, yes.
Yeah, back in the teens. That was with the HBK line versus the 2008 Pittsburgh Passion women's football. They went 8-0 and won a championship. But once again, not to disparage women's football, but I'm going to say the 2016 Penguins Stanley Cup was probably a little tougher competition and just more popular sport. And moving on, but hey, they made the tournament, and sometimes when you're a 14 seed, you celebrate that, right?
There you go.
They tore down the field goal post at Couple Stadium after they made the tournament, I'm sure.
Nice.
The number 2 seed at the bottom of this bracket is the 1974 Steelers. It was their first Super Bowl. They won Super Bowl 9 over the Vikings versus the 1999 Penguins. They defeated the top seed Devils on a Yager goal that saved the team. We did a whole podcast on that. They did lose the Maple Leafs the next. I had the 74 Steelers moving on since they won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, that, like we talked about in that episode, the 99 Penguins was kind of a mediocre team that overachieved and had Yager playing his best season that he ever had. So it's a memorable team, and they deserve credit, but definitely not better than the first Steelers team that won the Super Bowl.
Now we're in the bottom half of the bracket. I don't know what you call it, the West Division, sure. The number one seed in this was the 2005 Steelers that won Super Bowl 40. Favorite team, probably my favorite Steelers team of all time. Favorite Super Bowl win. It was the first Super Bowl that I remember them winning, even though I guess I was like, could have cried and goo goo gaga in 1979 when they won. I mean, I was 3 years old, you know. But, and they were going against the 16 seed 1984 Pittsburgh Spirit. If you don't remember the Pittsburgh Spirit, they were an indoor soccer team. They made the playoffs and they lost to Cleveland in the playoffs. Obviously, the Steelers winning Super Bowl 40 moved on over the Pittsburgh Spirit.
Yeah, I love the Pittsburgh Spirit. 1984, I went to a lot of games that year, actually. My family, I was
Do you remember anybody? I don't know anybody off the team.
Oh, yeah. Stan Terlecki was their best player.
Okay. Was he like a regular soccer player that started playing indoor? Or?
Yeah, they all were. I mean, it was, I don't remember what the details were, but he was really good. I don't remember if he was on the team in 84. He might not have been by that point, but they had some good players, and it was fun to watch. And for years, I thought that's what soccer was because I was a kid. I hadn't seen what real soccer was. And I just thought that's what soccer was, 5-on-5 in a little arena with a bunch of goals. And I was shocked when I got a little older to find out that's not what soccer was. But it was fun to watch. Definitely the 2005 Steelers were.
Well, they made the tournament. Wherever they are, they're celebrating. Number 8 seed was our 1937 Pitt Football National Championships. They went 9-0-1 with a tie to Fordham. That tie to Fordham is considered a big upset in Pitt football history for some reason, because I think Fordham was the number 1 or number 2 seed at the time. And the versus the number 9 seed, which is the 1968 Pittsburgh Pipers. They won an ABA championship with star Connie Hawkins. This is another close one. I just had the Pitt Football National Champions going on. I mean, just a little maybe higher competition even for 1937. And it's the ABA. I don't know how good the ABA was in 1968. That was pre Dr. J, and that's pre-merger too.
Yeah,
with the NBA.
They didn't merge till the 70s. I mean, again, it's there's a lot of good memories of the ABA, and it was cool that Pittsburgh had a team that won the championship. But then they moved the next season right after they won the championship. So it was still pretty unstable at that point. And if they hadn't had Connie Hawkins, I don't know how much we'd even remember that. So. I'm with you. Let's put the national championship, and they were undefeated national championship. So,
number 6, the 1903 Pirates. They played in the first World Series to the Boston Americans, and their obnoxious fans, the Royal Rooters. Against the 12 seed, those 1982 Pitt Panthers, who beat Georgia on a Sugar Bowl on a 4th down play to, was it John Brown, the tight end?
Yes, John Brown.
And kind of an upset. Like I had a Pitt moving on from this, beating a team that did make a championship game at least. In the World Series was 9 games back then.
Right.
Fun fact. But they didn't play all. I think they won like in the 6th or 7th game anyway. But I had the 82 Pitt team with Marino beating 1903 Pirates. I think Honus Wagner was on that team too, probably.
He was, and Boston had Cy Young. It was a tough matchup, and it was pioneering. I mean, I think it was more important that they played a World Series and that the fact that they, lost it, because it started its annual trend that continued almost every year after that. So that was a big deal historically. I don't know how good of a team they were. Again, it's hard to rank 1903 competition. So that 1982 Pitt team, like you said, has that memorable Sugar Bowl.
And I guess you should bring up too, there was like segregation back then, so you didn't maybe face the best competition.
That's a very good point.
Yeah. And number 7 seed was the 2001 Penguins. They lost the conference final to the Devils versus the number 10 1936 Pitt football. They finally won the Rose Bowl over Washington 21-0. Yay, it's our only Rose Bowl win. So since Pitt won the Rose Bowl, and I think the Rose Bowl is still, like, maybe my dad really got me indoctrinated on this, like, the Rose Bowl is his favorite bowl. You think, and I kind of like have started to agree with him. I think the Rose Bowl's like, as Keith said, granddaddy of them all. So you win that. That's definitely the biggest bowl game you can win in my mind. Even though there's national championship now, kind of.
Yeah.
So I have 1936 Pitt moving on over the 2001 Penguins.
Yeah, that 2001 Pens team, I fully intend to do an episode about them at some point. That was the year Mario came back, and it was a great year. A lot of good stories that year, but hard to argue with a team that won the Rose Bowl, even if it was in 1936.
The number 5 seed, the 2008 Penguins. This was the team, the first time they were really the second year they were back in the playoffs, and they lost to the Red Wings in the final versus the 11 seeded 1989 Steelers. They, after a bad start, this is the team we covered them in one of our podcasts
in our 80 Steelers episode.
Because they gotten blown out by Cleveland and I think Cincinnati, but Noel was able to put it together. And he got them into the playoffs, and they upset the Houston Oilers, and then they almost upset the Broncos. But that's in Denver. It's tough to beat Denver in Denver. But I think that 2008 Penguins team was just better. They had more star power, and it was like kind of a preview of things to come. And they did go to Game 6, which they almost scored at the last second. Like the puck went in, but I didn't know the puck never did go in, but
right.
it was really close
to go.
Close.
It was Marian Hossa at the last second to tie it. Yeah, that was a really good team. They stormed through the playoffs. They only lost 2 playoff games en route to the Stanley Cup final. Like they just stormed through the playoffs, and then the Red Wings were just better. And yeah, that '89 Steelers team is still one of my favorites. But they weren't a very good team. They were dead last in the league in total offense that year. Bubby Brister was their quarterback. So it was a fun year. It was a great year. Memorable. They got Jerry Glanville fired. That was awesome. But wasn't really that good of a team.
The number 4 seed was the 91 Penguins. This is kind of a soft spot team. Like they won the first cup in team history. Pretty good team. They kind of got lucky. They only had to play even though Minnesota got hot. Minnesota wasn't that great of a team. I guess they did have Belfour as their goalie. No.
Yeah, John Casey.
Yeah, John Casey.
Yeah, Belfour was Chicago the next year.
Yeah, but against the 13-seeded 2010 Pitt basketball wins the Big East and number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. I think that's the year they lost to Butler in the second round. Was it? Yeah, I think
that was when Butler had their back-to-back.
Yeah.
Championship game appearances.
Yeah, that's kind of a disappointment. That was the one they fouled the guy like on the other side of the court. I think.
Yeah.
And so I had the Pens first cup win.
Yeah, that's easy.
From that. Yeah. 1976, the last time Pitt won a national champs, they are the number 3 seed in the next bracket versus the 1992 Steelers. This was kind of the Steelers' big comeback year after some down years. They went 11-5, but they lost to Buffalo in the first round of the playoffs in a blowout. Really, well, Rod Woodson got hurt. And there's this guy Sammy Walker, and even interviews with Jim Kelly and them later, it was third and Sammy. But I have the Pens. I have the Pitt football moving on from that one because they were national champs and they blew out Georgia. Woohoo!
Yeah, another
SEC. There was lots of SEC chanting, I'm sure. Right.
Another memorable Steelers season.
But Pitt, I think, chanted independent because they weren't in a conference and whatever.
Yeah, memorable Steelers season, but again, one where they were nowhere close to the best team in the league that year, whereas Pitt was the best team in the country.
The number 2 seed at the bottom of the bracket, the last team will go over in this initial round, I guess. There is no name for the first round, is there, in the NCAA? No.
We'll call it the first
round. Yeah. The 1975 Steelers, they won the Super Bowl over Dallas. I think that's the first Super Bowl win over Dallas.
Correct.
Yeah. And then the 1992 Pirates, painful one there. They played 7 games. They had the lead. The umpire gets hurt. He won't call a strike for poor Stan Belinda. Stan Belinda grooves one to Francisco Cabrera, and Sid Breen hobbles in. So That was an easy one there. The Steelers win the Super Bowl over Dallas. Then we'll not say anything more about that board.
Yes. Let's never speak of it again.
Except in that podcast we do on the 92
Yes,
Pirates.
yes. Just a few more rounds of therapy, and I'll be ready to cover that one.
Okay. Moving on to we're not even into the Sweet 16 yet, but this is the second round. But some of these teams we've already gone over. In this second round matchup, top of the bracket, back in the other side again, the 1978 Steelers Super Bowl 13 win versus 2016 Pitt football 8-4. Like I said, I think this is probably the Steelers' best Super Bowl win, and I rate this team very highly because, like I said, Dallas is a very good team. Pitt football had a good season, but they didn't win their bowl game, didn't win the national championship. Kind of had like your stereotypical Pitt season, upset a couple high-ranked teams. So I have the Steelers Super Bowl 13 win coming in over that. The 2013 Pirates Cueto chant game versus the Steeler Cordell 13-3 team. I had the Steelers moving on since they went a little farther in the playoffs than the Pirates did. I mean, because they only made the divisional. Yeah, so the Steelers made the championship and lost to the eventual champion. So I have the 13-3 Steelers moving on to the Sweet 16 from that. The 93 Penguins lose to Islanders. This is probably, I'll say more, I've been kind of waiting to talk about this because this is probably one of the best teams in Penguins history, and they never won a Stanley Cup. And I think it's the only team that the Penguins never. That's the only team that won a President's Trophy, right?
Yes.
So they're really good. And then just the 2008 Steelers, they won Super Bowl 43, but they didn't. I never I just kind of felt like they got a little lucky in their matchups. Like they played Arizona. In Arizona, it was kind of got hot at the right time. The teams I was afraid of them playing got all eliminated. I remember that year. And then, they did have to beat Baltimore in a championship game, in a memorable championship game, I think. Was that? Yeah.
Yes.
So that was, it's a good Steelers team. It's a great win, and maybe there's a little bit of an upset, but I just think that Penguins team that I know this kind of breaking my own rule here. But I put the Penguins losing to the Islanders ahead of the Steelers winning Super Bowl 43.
Yeah, that's definitely a controversial one there, Steve. But I see what you're saying there because that 93 Pens team was so good. They set the NHL record for consecutive wins at the end of they have won 17 games in a row, I think, at the end of the season.
Yeah.
So that's how they went into the playoffs with the longest winning streak in league history. That was the year Mario came back from cancer. I mean, they were just unstoppable. They were going to win their third cup. They were going to play Wayne Gretzky in the Stanley Cup Finals.
Well, they would have had to beat the Canadians too, who had
right.
a guy named Patrick Wall.
They
who was
would have
playing out of his mind.
They would have,
Yeah.
but they could have. It would have been Mario versus Gretzky in the finals. It just everything was set up. It was such a disappointing loss because that team was probably better than the other two that won the cup. It probably was up and down the roster, but sometimes the best team doesn't always win, and that was a good example.
Well, they never can beat the Islanders. Every team has their Achilles heel, and for the Penguins, for some reason, that's the New York Islanders.
Yes.
And that, like I said, that Super Bowl 43 team, they were decent. I think they did have a top-ranked defense, but they got absolutely shredded in the Super Bowl.
Larry Fitzgerald in the fourth quarter. I mean, you could argue there were a lot of upsets that year in the playoffs. Like you said, Arizona was a 9-7 team. And then even the Steelers, even playing the Ravens was tough. But, again, there were a lot of upsets. They didn't have to play the Colts and Peyton Manning. That was the year Brady got hurt.
Yeah.
So they didn't have to go through the Patriots. So you could make an argument that the competition maybe wasn't the best that year for the Steelers.
All right, moving on to the next matchup, which would be the 2017 Penguins. That was their second of their back-to-back cups in the teens. 1979 Steelers, they won Super Bowl 14. That was against the Rams. I guess that was the second. These are the battle of the two back-to-back teams, aren't they?
Yeah.
And I just think the Steelers really struggled beating the Rams. They really did. They were down in that game.
In the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and and the Rams weren't really that good.
The Rams were another.
Yeah.
I keep saying. I feel like I've said 9-7 like 4 times this
Yeah.
episode, but the Rams were a 9-7 team that year.
Yeah.
They beat Tampa Bay in an NFC Championship game, so that was another year of a lot of upsets.
And the Steelers that was the year they kind of got lucky against Houston with Renfro being
Right.
called out of the end zone when he really wasn't.
They were good.
So-
They were good. That was probably the worst of their 4 Super Bowl teams. And
Houston probably should at least have been in that game late in the game,
right.
rather than down 2 touchdowns.
And the 2017 Penguins, I've always said that's probably the least, I don't know how to say it, the least talented of the 5 Stanley Cup teams, but it was always my favorite. Like, I just felt like that team never quit. They were going to win that cup no matter what, even if it took double overtime of Game 7 in the conference finals. It was just a great team. So, yeah, I'm with you on this one. I'd give the 2017 Penguins over the 79 Steelers.
So now we got the 71 Pirates, who won the World Series against all those Baltimore 20-game winners, against the 1955 Duquesne. Nope, hold on, I skipped ahead there. Okay, yeah, we're still in the second round, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. 1971 Pirates, who won the World Series, versus the 81 Pitt Football, who's 11-1. I went with the 71 Pirates. They won the World Series. Pitt Football underachieved a little, losing that game last year. They did get a number 2 ranking. And moving on to the next matchup, that would be the 2012 Penguins, who were swept in the conference final by Boston, versus the 1955 Duquesne wins the NIT. There's another upset. I really ranked this Duquesne team highly because I really think, like I said before, I think the NIT was really, you meant something outside of, like, it was probably really was you were the de facto second champion of the NCAA back then.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And that 2012-13 Penguins team that got swept in the conference final, they put up 2 goals in that series.
Yeah.
They had beaten the Islanders and the Senators, like 2 teams that weren't great, to get there. That was a strike-shortened season. It was a good team because they made it far, but I never thought it was a great team. So I'm with you there with Duquesne.
And then the next matchup is the 1925, the Pirates' Forgotten World Series versus those plucky Pittsburgh Triangles. This is a pretty easy one. The Pirates winning the World Series is definitely worth more than whatever the championship the Pittsburgh Triangles won.
I did look it up, Steve. Vitas Gerulaitis was their best player on the Pittsburgh Triangle, so he later went on to win some big titles like the Australian Open. So you asked
the Australian Open, is that a major?
Yeah, it's a Grand Slam. Yeah, so he was a good tennis player. But you asked who played for the Triangle, so I wanted to give you a name there before we eliminated them out of this bracket.
Nice. But the 25 Pirates definitely, and I think did they have Pie Trainer or like one of those
yeah,
the other.
Yeah, the Wayner brothers.
The Wayners. I think they had the Wayner.
Yeah, I think that was that era, yes.
And the next bracket, the 1909 Pirates, their first World Series win, versus the 1960 Pirates. It's the battle of Pirates World Series win. No offense to the 1909 Pirates, the first time is always the memorable, but 1960 is just iconic and more memorable than the 1909. I mean, I don't think it's either two, just because I think if you go to 2060, fast forward, how many years that is in the future, and people still be talking about the 1960 World Series.
You're right. And they both beat really good teams. 09, they had to beat Detroit with Ty Cobb. In 1960, they had to beat the almighty Yankees. So
that's right. Yeah, it was the battle of like the good guy Honus Wagner versus like everybody hated. Yeah, the Field of Dreams. We all hated him when we played.
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
So I told him to stick it. Yeah.
So yeah, but it was like, I think both of those series were against teams that were powerhouses, and the Pirates won both times. But definitely, you're right. 60 Pirates, just because they're so iconic.
And the Yankees were good, but both those teams were really good. I mean, the Tigers and the Yankees definitely had Hall of Famers, and Maris and it was Mantle.
Yeah, Yogi Berra. Yeah.
So, and it's always fun to hear New York fans whine. moving over to the other side of the bracket, we have still the top-seeded 1979 Family Pirates versus the 1931 Pitt Football, who won the national championship with one loss. I'm going with the Pirate family over that. The national champion ones are voted. It's just voted on, and they did have one loss. And the Pirates did come back from 3-1. Baltimore was still pretty good in '79. I'm sure Baltimore doesn't ever want to see us in a World Series again. But I had the.
They won't have to worry about that, I don't think, anytime soon.
Well, I don't think either team has to worry. You never know. But the Pirates are moving on to the Sweet 16. I had the 2009 Pitt Football, the next matchup, versus the 95 Steelers, who lost Super Bowl 30. That was the 10-3 Pitt Football team that lost to Cincinnati. I have the 95 Steelers losing to the Cowboys in Super Bowl 30, moving on out of this matchup. Just achieved a lot more than that Pitt Football team did, and probably, even though, how good were the Colts, but still. How good was the University of Cincinnati and Tony Pike? Really? He went on to have, a arena football career.
yeah, tough call here. Do you want to give it to the Pitt football team that blew the Big East championship game on a botched extra point? Or do you want to give it to the Steelers team that blew the Super Bowl because Neil threw it to a guy covering grass? So we'll go with the covering grass.
Yeah, good call.
It was a memorable season, like we said.
Okay, moving on. The next matchup, 72 Steelers that lost in the championship game. That's the Immaculate Reception team. And the 92 Penguins who won the Stanley Cup with all those Hall of Famers. I think this is another pretty easy one, even though the Penguins are the lower seed here. The Penguins winning the Cup, and with that team's really, outside of the 93 team, this is probably their second best team. But this team achieved a cup, and the 93 team never did.
This was also the year that Mario, Adam Graves broke his wrist.
Yeah.
And they had to overcome that.
And then Badger Bob had passed away.
That's right, yeah. So that's a really memorable team.
Next up is the 2016, who they played. We'll do that next round. We'll talk about who the Penguins played in their team, because they played a pretty good Blackhawks team.
They did.
The 2016 Penguins with the HBK line versus the 1974 Steelers. They won Super Bowl IX. I put the Penguins Cup win with the HBK over the Steelers Super Bowl win. And it got kind of tough, but I just think that Penguins team had a smoother run, and it was just kind of all defense and Franco up the left, Franco to the right, and let's throw him a bone and run up the middle. Ooh, it was 2-0 at halftime.
Right.
I do believe.
Right.
So I'm putting definitely the Penguins HBK Cup over the Steelers' first Super Bowl win.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Again, of the 4 Super Bowl wins, if you had to rank them, I think you've got to put the 2 against the Cowboys above the other 2, just because of the competition and because they were better seasons. They were better all-around teams.
Yeah, the 1974 team was probably a little fortunate to win that. They really didn't have any offense.
They started that year with Joe Gilliam at quarterback.
Yeah.
Bradshaw wasn't even the starter at the beginning of the season that year. And like you said, it was really Franco. It was a very power-running, power defense team, and that's how they won.
We're in the bottom half of the bracket, so still the 2005 Steelers win Super Bowl 40. Versus the 1937 Pitt Football National Championship team. This is another tough one, but Super Bowl 40, it's a little more recent, probably a little more sentimental favorite for me. I put them over the Pitt Football National Championship of 1937, although, that's still a pretty memorable accomplishment. They didn't lose any games, though they did tie one. But moving on to the 1982 Pitt Panthers win Sugar Bowl. That's the first team in our matchup. And the 1936 is the Battle of the Pitt teams. 1936 Pitt football. That was the first time they won the Rose Bowl. I ranked the Rose Bowl over the Sugar Bowl, like I said, even though it was 1936. I think the Rose Bowl is the top dog when it comes to bowl games. So I don't know. Figure on that one. And in 2008, the next matchup was the 2008 Penguins, who lost to the Red Wings in that memorable Cup final, versus the 91 Penguins that won their first Stanley Cup. Another battle of Penguins teams. The Pens won the Stanley Cup, so first criteria met. They definitely take over a team that was pretty good and made it to the final, but didn't quite get over the hump that year. In the bottom half of our bracket, we have the 1976 Pitt Football National Championship against the 1975 Steelers win Super Bowl over Dallas. That's a tough one. I don't know. I mean, I kind of went with the 76 Pitt football team. They blew out Georgia, and I think they went undefeated. They didn't lose any games.
Right.
So, and I mean, that Steelers team was pretty good. Like you said, that's a pretty good Steelers team, but just maybe Pitt football just had a little better. I mean, that was a pretty close one. That was a little better.
Yeah, that was a 2-3 matchup, and 2-3 matchups are usually two of the three best teams. So that's a tough one, and I don't think there's a right answer to that. So you're right. 76 Pitt was 12-0. You can't take that away from them. Both teams won championships. So 1976 Pitt moves on.
Yep. Moving backward into the Sweet 16 now. All teams we've talked about a lot. The 78 Steelers Super Bowl 13 against Dallas versus the 2001 Steelers 13-3 team that lost to the Patriots. That's an easy one. The 78 Steelers moving on.
Yes.
Cordell can't get it done against the 1978 defense.
Probably not.
The 93 Penguins team is still in it. They made the Sweet 16, even though they didn't win a championship. Probably a little controversial, but like I said, a lot of Hall of Famers. Very good team. Only team to win a President's Cup. But they went against their other Penguins team that won the back-to-back, the second of the back-to-back team games over Nashville. I put the once again, the Stanley Cup champion winning team over that 93 team. Though they were very talented, very good, very successful regular season, they didn't get it done in the postseason.
Makes sense.
So they're moving on to the Elite Eight. The 71 Pirates versus the 1955 Duquesne NIT team. I put the 71 Pirates over this. That's a World Series win. That's a very good team. Was that the Baltimore team with 20 game winners, like 3 or 4 20-game winners?
I can't remember
Pitchers,
if that was that or 79, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was a pretty good Baltimore team, and Duquesne winning. I think Duquesne making the Sweet 16 is pretty impressive for Duquesne.
Yeah, and Duquesne made it that far. So.
But like I said before, I really think that NIT win was worth a lot more than it is now.
Yep.
In the bottom half of our bracket, we have the 1925 Pirates versus the 60 Pirates. I have the 60 Pirates moving on to the Elite Eight.
Yeah, again, our iconic team.
Yeah.
No offense to the 25 team. Kind of funny that 25 team's kind of forgotten. It might be interesting to do an episode about that.
We'd have to do, that would take me, I'd have to go back to the library and look at the microfilm again, yeah.
Yeah, you'd have to dig up some research, but that's not, cause I think the 09 team, even though that was also more than 100 years ago, that was the Hannes Wagner, Ty Cobb. I don't know, you just hear more about that. The 25 team, it's a little forgotten, so.
Out of all the championships in Pittsburgh sports, at least the major ones, more people probably know the Pittsburgh Passion won a championship than the 25 Pirates.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's kind of forgotten.
I have the Pirates 79 family win versus the 92 Penguins. We're in the Elite Eight now, yeah?
No, you're still in the Sweet 16.
Oh, we're still in the Sweet 16? Okay.
79
Pirates versus Steelers Super Bowl 30. I keep losing my place. But in a preview of the Elite Eight, obviously the Pirates won. Moving on from Super Bowl 30, the Pirates winning a World Series over Steelers, losing, throwing the grass. Neil couldn't beat Willie Stargell. The 92 Penguins, they won their second cup versus the 2016 Penguins, who win the cup. Tough call, but I really like that 92 Penguins team. I think they weren't quite as good as the 93 Penguins team, but they achieved a lot more than the 93 Penguins team, so I have them moving on, even though the HBK line was pretty devastating. I just think that 92 team, I mean, was Yager their third line center?
Yeah, I mean,
Or third line, or no, well, he was a wing, so.
well, he was
it's
only in
a
his
wing.
second season, and he was a pretty key player. But they had so many other. It was just stacked. It was a really good team.
Super Bowl 40 Steelers versus 1936 Pitt football. I have Super Bowl 40 over 1936 Pitt football team. And they're moving on to the Elite Eight. The 91 Penguins that win their first Stanley Cup versus the 1976 Pitt Football National Championship. Just because it's an undefeated season and it's so rare in college football, I kind of put that over the first Stanley Cup. So 1976 Pitt football moving on to the Elite Eight over the Penn's first Stanley Cup. They both won championships. It's a pretty, like you said, a pretty close matchup, but I just think the undefeated maybe puts Pitt over the edge on that one.
Yeah, again, that's another one I think with no right or wrong answer, so it's fair.
Nice. So now we're in the Elite Eight. Right? Yes.
Yep.
So it would be the 78 Steelers, or is that the final? No, that's the Final Four. Yeah. 78 Steelers versus the 2017 Penguins, who won back-to-back cups. Like I said, the Steelers team was really good. So I had them going over the back-to-back cup teams of Nashville. Like you said, they maybe weren't the talented, but they're definitely a plucky team. But I think that, the Steelers, that's definitely they're one of their strongest Super Bowl teams. We'll talk about them more later. The 71 Pirates versus the 1960 Pirates. This is another tough one, but once again, I just think the 1960 Pirates, they played the Yankees, who were probably better than the Orioles, the Baltimore Orioles. So I had the 60 Pirates moving on to the next round. Okay. What are we in the Elite Eight, right?
Yeah, so you have 79 Pirates and 92 Penguins.
Or no, did we do that one yet? No. Okay, yeah, the Pirates versus the Penguins. I have the Penguins winning their second cup over the Pirates World Series. Once again, yeah, I just think that's a strong team. And the Pirates World Series is good, but they had to come back from 3 games to 1. The Penguins, although the Penguins had to do that early in the. Did they do that?
They in the first round, but by the time they got to the finals, they won. What was it? 11 games in a row, I think, to win the Stanley Cup. So they were just a powerhouse. Yeah, you got to give it to them.
Super Bowl 40 winners, 2005 Steelers versus the 76 national champions of Pitt. I'm going with Super Bowl 40. I think the competition, they beat a Colts team that was the top seed, and then they beat Denver, who was the second seed, who had beaten the Patriots. Whenever they say the Steelers never beat the Patriots, well, I can't help it. Like, the Patriots couldn't beat Denver, and the Steelers did. So I think that makes the Steelers better. And the Patriots got blown out in that game in Denver. So whatever. And that was the Jake Plummer is come on,
right.
Blown up by Jake Plummer. Okay, defensive genius. So the defensive genius couldn't figure out how to stop Jake Plummer, so the 2005 Steelers move on over the Pitt Football National Championship. But it's still, that's another probably closer than it probably should have been.
So Steve, who are your final 4? Let's list them out.
Okay, the final 4 is the Penguins win the second cup, the 2005 Steelers winning their Super Bowl 40, the 1960 Pirates winning the World Series, and the 1978 Steelers winning Super Bowl 30.
So all 4 of these are championship teams, and arguably
they're all iconic,
right.
And they're all like. It was tough. But I think that 1978 Steelers team was the best team outside, like best regular season and postseason team the Steelers have ever had.
Yeah.
So I put them over the 1960 Pirates because, quite honestly, it is iconic, and they beat a very good Yankees team. But look at the scores from that World Series. It's insanity. Like, when they lost like 10-3. Like, the games weren't even close. And then, like, I don't know who the pitchers for the Yankees exactly, but they must have only had like 1 or 2 good ones, because like the Pirates, like whenever they had those other games, they would be slugfest, and they won them. To their credit, they won them. And, it just goes to show, just because you lose every game by a big margin doesn't mean you lose the World Series.
Right.
But I had the 1978 Steelers moving on to the championship game over the 1960 Pirates.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And that theme of, who was really more dominant, I think you kind of use that on the other side of the bracket too.
Yeah. And then we have the 92 Penguins win the second cup versus the 2005 Steelers win Super Bowl 40. Both teams played tough competition. Like, I'd like to talk about the Chicago Blackhawks for a minute. Their two goalies were Eddie Belfour and some guy named Dominic Hasek. I just watched a replay of Game 4. Like, that Game 4 in the Blackhawks series really should have been like 10-0. Like, Hasek stoned Mario 3 times on a breakaway. So, the Blackhawks were really good that year. And it just shows how good the Penguins were. They could play it any way you wanted. And the Blackhawks tried to shut it down. They tried to, skate with them. And they just, no matter what they did, and they put out like a really good goalie. Hasek, Quine hadn't come into his own by then, but he still had a pretty good performance in that game. So I really ranked that 92 Penguins team highly. I think that's the best of the Penguins Cup teams. And the 2005 Steelers they were good. I mean, would you say they're the third best Steelers Super Bowl winning team? I mean, I don't know. Behind that other team that beat Dallas, I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, they were, so when you talk about competition, the 05 Steelers had to beat the top 3 seeds in the AFC playoffs, and they beat the
Seahawks,
the number 1 seed from the NFC. So they have that.
They didn't play a great Super Bowl, but they did win.
No, they didn't. And in terms of, again, if you're looking at dominance, that team was 7-4, had to win its final 4 games just to make the playoffs. It was a great run, and it's a memorable team, but the 92 Penguins, again, after that second round against the Rangers, they just steamrolled everybody. And so, yeah, I think I'd give it to the 92 Penguins here also.
So that led to our championship game of the 78 Steelers versus the 92 Penguins. And it's another, so this is for like what I think who had the best season all time. And it had 2 championship winning teams, 2 teams that played tough competition. 2 teams that are iconic. I mean, lots of players on these teams in the Hall of Fame. I gave it to the 78 Steelers. I think they're the best. Just by maybe a nose over the Penguins Cup, that Penguins Cup team, and maybe just too because football's a little more popular sport. I don't know, but maybe that played into it a little too. But that Penguins Cup team was no slouch. The 92, they were really good.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. I mean, that's generally remembered as not only the greatest Steeler team ever, but one of the greatest NFL teams ever. And the 92 Penguins, probably one of the best hockey teams ever. But I think the 78 Steelers, in terms of if you're thinking outside of just Pittsburgh teams, more people would recognize that as an all-time great team than the 92 Pens. So I think for that reason too, it's a good pick to pick the 78 Steelers as the winner of your overall bracket.
Well, there you have it. Feel free to leave comments. But we have a Twitter page, Pittsburgh Sports Memories. You can tell me how I was wrong. How the Pittsburgh Triangles really got jobbed in that matchup.
I'm sure you're gonna have a lot of angry Pittsburgh Triangles fans. For sure. I had a lot of fun making this. It's like great sports debate. I'm surprised you agreed with me as much as you did. I thought you would disagree with me more, especially when I fit Pittsburgh Triangles. Were there any teams that you left off altogether that you thought could have been on here?
Not that I can think of. I mean, not off the top of my head.
There might be. The only team I could even think of that I might have put on here was the 76 Steelers. So that was,
I did kind of leave them off, and they made the championship game against Oakland.
Yeah, and that was the year that they had like 5 shutouts. They didn't have a very good offense, and Bradshaw was hurt, but they had like 5 shutouts that year, which is unheard of.
But I said it in the sake of like being a little more diverse in our sport. Like, come to like a 15 or 16 seed, I was kind of putting in like, maybe other sports that people don't
Yeah.
really think
Yeah,
about.
no, that's fair. That makes sense.
Especially if a team won a championship, I like to at least recognize that.
Absolutely.
I mean, I'm sure not many people remember that tennis championship, but it happened.
Well, and same with the ABA championship. I mean, and I like that. I like that you did that. You had teams in here that maybe not everybody remembers, and sometimes that's better than like, oh, remember that one year that the Steelers lost in the first round of the playoffs, but they were really good. Well, okay, but were they? You know, so that was good. Getting a little diverse with this.
Well, thanks for tuning in. Like I said, feel free to share comments on our webpage, which is, again,
PittsburghSportsMemories.weebly.com.
yeah, and we're on Twitter and Facebook also. So feel free to vent your frustrations with my picks there, and thanks for listening in.
Thanks, everybody.